Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Alex Linger and Chris Moran from West Virginia Radio Corporation. They join Chris Tobin and me to talk about some of the new things they're doing with AOIP, mixing networks together, and IPSTLs. It's all coming up on This Week in Radio Tech. Our show is brought to you by Lavo and the Crystal Clear Virtual Radio Console. Crystal Clear is the console with a multi-touch touchscreen interface. By Direct Current Broadcast e-newsletter. Get Direct Current in your inbox every Thursday with technical pointers putting you and your facility at an advantage. And by Zipstream streaming software, audio processing, and stream encoding. Ask your Telos dealer about special promo pricing on Zipstream X2 and 9X2. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. It's the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower and a whole lot of ones and zeros in between, maybe even some analog levels from time to time. I'm glad you're here. We have a blast doing this show, and this week is even more fun than ever because we've got a couple of great engineers to join our usual great engineer and me. So we're all here, and we're going to crank up the volume, sit back, and enjoy the show. First of all, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. That's where my studio is. I won't be coming to you from here next week, though. Next week, we're actually doing the show live from Columbus, Ohio, the site of the Ohio Association of Broadcasters Convention, and their engineering conference, I should say, and the SBE National Membership Meeting is going on there in Columbus. So a new board of directors members will be sworn in, and so it's going to be a big time. The whole thing will be live streamed, by the way. The whole proceedings from the SBE, their ceremony, will be live streamed. So we'll check all that out and come to you live from there. In fact, that reminds me, we may have to do the show at an earlier time next week in order to get some bandwidth. Because if we don't do it, we're borrowing bandwidth. We're going to have a ton of it, but if we got to borrow it on their schedule. So I'll be in touch, Suncast, and also with Andrew Zarian, make sure we can move the show earlier, see if that's going to be a possibility. All right. Chris Tobin is along. He has once again implemented Plan B, and you wouldn't even know it unless I told you. He's at where are you at? Chickies and who's?
Chickies and Pete's Sports Bar. They have 13 or 14 locations in the greater Philadelphia area, so I'm in one of them. That's all I can say. They've graciously allowed me just to be here for a short spell before another broadcaster shows up to do their thing. So they have a contract with the local broadcast stations to do some stuff, so I'm just here because I happen to know some people at the stations that are working with them. So networking always pays off at that last Plan B, Plan B from outer space.
It does. In fact, I got to ask you, because this is a show where we talk about such things, whose bandwidth are you using today?
I am using the venue's bandwidth. It just so happens that the manager is a fan of one of the local stations that I happen to be friends with, so we got talking, and he allowed me access to the corporate bandwidth, not the guest bandwidth in the venue.
Ooh. Hey, are there any ketchup bottles involved this week?
Right here. Here it is.
What?
But we're doing today is a wired today is Wi-Fi off the laptop. I'm actually beneath the Wi-Fi hotspot, so I'm well within range. I did a speed test, and my download speed's at 45 megabits. My upload's at 25, and so far so good.
Gee, that's fantastic. And so you're not having to send microwaves through the kitchen and pick them up on a ketchup bottle this time?
No, not today. I lucked out. It turns out that I didn't have to go that far. But maybe
awesome.
Next week.
That is awesome. I love your creativity, man. I mean, all of us, we need to take a cue from Chris Tobin and just learn how to and I know that most engineers do that anyway. I'm not putting anybody down, but just open your mind and think about the positive. You know what? I had years ago when I had a contract engineering firm, I had an employee who taught me so much. His name was Robert Benjamin. He left the business and went on he's building jet engines for GE or something like that. But Robert always asked the question, well, what is it we're really trying to accomplish here? And that would just open up the possibilities to getting it done. And that was just, I learned so much from him. I'm so grateful that Robert Benjamin worked with me for several years at Harnack Engineering. If you're listening, Robert, hi, how you doing? Glad to have had you as an employee. All right, let's bring in our guests now, and I'm delighted to have these guys on the air. It seems like I'd met Chris Moran some years ago, sometime, or heard of him. maybe at some West Virginia broadcasting thingamabob, but heard about a podcast that some guys were doing called the Radio Tech Guys. And of course, immediately my hackles went up. What? Somebody's doing a podcast about radio? That's my job. And I watched a couple of their shows. Oh my goodness, these guys get it. I mean, they really do a fantastic job of showing technology and explaining how to do stuff. And we do a little bit of that here, but we also just chat and have fun on this show. So let's bring them in. Alex Linger on your left, on the left-hand side of your radio dial, and Chris Moran on the right. Did I get that order correct? Yeah? I think I did.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes Skype reverses stuff. I guess it just reverses me, not you.
Right. You started to say left and right, and I was thinking, wait, I'm on. That's not. But then I saw the program feed. That is absolutely correct.
Guys, we're going to run to our first commercial pretty soon. Give us the Radio Tech Guys elevator speech. Tell me what you're about and what you do.
Wow, do we have anything like that?
We'll make one up here on the fly. It's pretty. It is. You hit the nail on the head. It's pretty much a podcast that is about the nuts and bolts of the technology of radio, all the way through kind of all the aspects of it. And we really like the down and dirty stuff, the in the trenches stuff, and how to make things work and get things done. And really, we're trying to do this thing once a week. It's an audio podcast that we do on video live while we record it. We're really producing an audio podcast once a week, and we're supplementing that with videos, a lot of behind the scenes and kind of how-to videos that we're uploading on our YouTube channel every week.
We're not always going to describe the factory or manufacturer method for getting things done. We like to sort of show some of the tricks and tips that we've come up with that aren't necessarily what the manufacturer says to do. But
so
we say that up front. We say that.
Sometimes you guys say, well, we read the manual, and here's what it says, but if you want to make it work, here's what you do. Right?
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
It's an efficiency.
I agree.
That's right.
So, and actually, when I first heard of you guys, I got your podcast and your helpful videos confused. So in just a minute, we'll deconfuse Kirk on that and talk about that. But right, I'll tell you what, Chris Tobin, if you would carry on for a second with, I know that both of you guys, Chris Tobin and Alex and Chris Moran, you guys have installed some audio over IP gear. I'm not sure if you guys in West Virginia were early adopters of that or not. Chat about that for a second. I got to find a piece of copy to help out our sponsors. So I'll be right back. Tobin, it's yours.
It's a call to the bullpen of sponsors. All right. Hey, with audio IP installations, and since you've done Axia, you're familiar with all the crazy stuff that goes into that. What is the first thing you would suggest to some operation broadcaster that says, well, we've got these Ward Beck consoles or Mercurius or maybe a PRNE BMX or AMX series, and we've decided we're going to go audio over the IP Ethernet approach that is. What do you tell them first before before they buy anything, they do whatever before they even decide which product? How do you prep them for the change, thinking, infrastructure, everything about it?
Yep. Planning is pretty critical. In fact, we did a video on that. That was one of the first ones we did. Our podcast is relatively new, 6 or 7 weeks old now. One of the first things we talked about was that very subject. Because there's so much, Chris, and I'm sure that changes the mindset change that has to happen when you're moving from an analog infrastructure to an IP infrastructure. It's in a good way because of the flexibility and things that exist. Planning and documenting up front is absolutely critical. In terms of knowing your inputs and outputs that you're going to need in every studio, and then in your wire room and your satellite rooms and the other places where you have peripherals, and how many pieces of remote equipment. Just knowing your input and output count, and changing your mindset from thinking about how you used to duplicate those things. For instance, if you had a network satellite receiver that had to make it to 6 stations, we were probably DAing that somewhere in the analog world and literally wiring it 6 times as 6 different automation switchers and whatever. That's all gone. So knowing your input and output counts, and then having a real good handle on the devices that you're going to be installing and their IP address scheme and channel numbering schemes. We have a kind of an Excel sheet that we built with several tabs that is kind of a tool that we use. We've ended up with 5 or 6 different markets now where we've done these installations, all kind of following the same template, and it's worked out really well. But definitely just getting a handle on that, the scope of your site, the input and output requirements, and also the IP addressing is critical up front. And
also planning ahead. Don't just plan for the studio that you're building, but plan ahead for the studio down the hall that you're going to do, and the other one. Make sure you've got the IP address scheme worked out so that you can add those studios easily.
Okay, that makes total sense. And that'd be like in the early days of analog, and you had to do your wire maps, the wire charts, and whatnot. So good. Well, I'm glad you said that, because I have talked to several folks over the last year or so on a couple of projects regarding IP, both audio, video, and it was interesting when I got to see the project. It was the proverbial IT closet of chaos. And I just looked at him. I said, so I'm curious, if you have a problem with this particular section of the LAN over this part of the studio complex, you have this huge performance space, how do you know what to troubleshoot and which nodes are connected? And they go, well, we're right here in the closet, you see, and you look at this, and this cable here says it. I'm like, well, that cable just has a number on it. Well, yeah. Okay, so where's it referenced to? Well, that book is in the chief engineer's office. Right, so we're in the closet right now with the equipment, and there may be a problem with the performance studio and the performance. How do we troubleshoot? Had to run back, find it, open up the book, and it turns out the numbers changed. Somebody made some changes. It didn't keep the documentation current. So I say this only because I've seen it happen, and I'll say this again, and Kirk knows I say this a lot. IT disciplines are very different than broadcast engineering disciplines, and you have to work even harder now, and you guys know this, to sort of stress to the folks you're working with in what I call a hybrid environment. Say the IT staff need to explain to them why, because I'm going to take this audio source from this satellite receiver and I'm going to send it across this LAN to 12 different locations using multicast. Then and there, they're going to panic like crazy. Then you're going to say, oh, by the way, my switches support IGMP. Do you work with that? And they'll be like, oh, thank goodness somebody knows what's going on. These are the two things that if you don't tell them this and you go and plug your stuff in, I can assure you they have probably some software that's going to shut down the ports on that switch, and before you know it, you're dead in the water. But I could be wrong.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Hey, guys, we're going to talk about our first sponsor for a second. You are listening or watching to This Week in Radio Tech, episode 322. Chris Tobin is along at Chickies and Pete's, and also the Radio Tech guys, Alex Linger and Chris Moran, are with us as well. Our show's brought to you in part by the folks at Lavo. Everywhere you go nowadays, you find touchscreens. My goodness, they're everywhere. It's amazing. Wouldn't you like to have the touchscreen contract for the world? That'd be a lot of touchscreens, a whole lot of commission there. They're on your smartphone, your tablet, of course. Supermarket checkouts have touchscreens. Laptops come with them, and so do the radios in new cars. Even airline cockpits have them. Even little airplane cockpits have them. Touchscreens make sense because they're simple and natural. Well, their intuitive controls help you finish tasks faster and with fewer errors. It's time that you brought the power of touch to your radio studio, too. You can with the Crystal Clear virtual radio console from Lavo. Crystal Clear gives talent an instantly understandable multi-touch interface. Faders, meters, clocks, and timers, talkback, and more, they all live in harmony on a single screen, so shows run smoother and sound better. Crystal Clear features Lavo's exclusive Auto Mix. That's pretty neat. The hands-free smart mixing algorithm designed for fast-paced multi-mic talk shows. And Auto Gain. You just push a button, and the preamp calibrates automatically while your guest speaks into the mic. So with so much advanced automation, talent can dock those mixing controls off to the side. And use the screen to do other things like working with delivery systems, audio editors, or phones and codecs. Crystal Clear's power plant measures 1 rack unit. That's pretty amazing when you consider all the DSP that's on board: compression, EQ, voice processing, precision delay. They can all be applied to all of your mic, line, and digital sources. Now, there's some optional upgrades available, and they include redundant power, if you want that, MADI, input-output, and Ravenna, which includes AES-67 compatibility. And all of this power costs no more than you'd spend for an ordinary board. Thinking about a new console? Well, don't decide before you check out Crystal Clear from Lavo. Go to www.lavo, that's LAWO.com, and read about it, or call Bill Bennett. He's at Lavo USA. His number is 888-810-4468. That's 888-810-4468 to find out more. The future's clear. It's Lavo, crystal clear. Thanks to Lavo for sponsoring this portion of This Week in Radio Tech. So you talk about planning and IP addresses and such like that, and I learned that the hard way by stubbing my toe really hard. Well, I guess one of the an early Axia customer did. I got a call from a friend of mine in Texas, and he said, "Kirk, thanks for coming down a few months ago and helping us to install this first console. So we bought a second one for that other room that you saw across the hall, and I just wired it all up like you did, and I turned it on, and when I did, the first station went off the air." I said, "Oh, wow, let me think about that a second." Did you change any of the channel numbers? I mean, you probably gave it a new IP address, but it comes with default channel numbers, and I'll bet you we used the default channel numbers on the first console. Probably should have changed them. Did you? He said, "Oh yeah, that's it." So that now if you're installing AOIP gear, you realize that, hey, I better not have any conflicts in the multicast IP addresses that I'm generating from all these different devices. Now we've got kind of easy schemes to figure that out, even some automatic schemes. But Alex and Chris, did you ever stub your toe like that?
Oh boy, it's funny you'd ask. There's a story. Unfortunately, it's about me, so I'm going to let Chris tell it.
Yeah, this has been recent, actually. In the last 6 months, maybe a little more, 6 months ago or so, we were putting, much like we talked about earlier, we were setting up a new studio. We were in a building that had already done its renovation for like the majority of the studios. There were 2 left that were still analog studios that we were getting ready to convert to audio over IP, and we were installing one of them. One evening we were here working on that, and just earlier in the day, Alex had went to go troubleshoot a problem in another studio where we had a production workstation in another control room, which was having trouble getting audio in and out of it over using a LiveWire audio driver. And he went in and messed around with that a little bit and played with that, and whatever, and thought, okay, great, everything's good, everything's working. And so we're working on this studio late at night, and one of the jocks here in the building came running into the studio where we were with his eyes as big as like coffee saucers, and said, the president is on the phone. There's something going on one of the streams. It's just an open microphone from one of these studios, and they've been listening to this private conversation for like 10 minutes about a topic that they shouldn't have been discussing. And so we ran around chasing our tails trying to figure that, like, what in the world is that? And it was just a dyslexic moment of an IP address change where instead of it was supposed to be something dot
should have been 16, and I made it 61.
61, which happened to be the last octet of an IP address of one of our studio power stations in another control room. And the long and short of it is we're still not exactly sure how the conflict down the road got things routed to where it was, but it had basically taken the input source to that LiveWire audio driver in that studio, mistaken for program 1 from that other LiveWire studio, and was routed directly to the web stream encoder for this big, gigantic country station, and was just putting open mics from that production room directly to the web stream.
So, lessons learned.
I'll bet you guys, and Chris Tobin, too, you probably have your own schemes, but my scheme, I mean, once I figured out that, there's the tyranny of the default. You ever heard that? The tyranny of the default, right? So when you get any piece of gear, and actually gear now comes with a quick setup, and you give it a 2-digit number at the front, and it gives you some exclusive IP addresses. But when you get a piece of gear, well, you wouldn't do this with a computer. You wouldn't put a computer on a network and not make sure its IP address wouldn't conflict, or at least use DHCP. So, and so when you assign channel numbers, I just take the last octet of the IP address of the device, and then I'll either add 1 through 8 or 1 through 4, or if it could have more than 10 items, I give it 0, 1 through 99. It could have that many, I suppose. But I base it on the third octet. of the IP address, and I'm sure there's places where that scheme runs out of range, but I haven't come across that yet myself. What do you guys do?
Yeah, same thing. That's our same principle is the same. We define studio numbers, and so the last octet will be studio 1. The last octet of the IP address is 10, beginning with that. That's the studio engine, and then there's other devices. They're up from there. And then channel numbers are based along that same thing. And we actually just this past month crossed our first facility with more than 10 studios. So we're now into the hundreds. Starting with 100 and 110 and 120 IP addresses for ours. But that's been our scheme too. We were lucky, I think, up front when we first started deploying this. We just intentionally went way high with our rack room and our kind of back end equipment by starting up with the 200s, 220s, 230s for that stuff. And so it's going to be well out of the way. We're pretty future proofed in that regard. But yeah, that's pretty much the same system we use.
And then we take it a step further. Our sites aren't interconnected, but we take the third octet from our business LAN, if you will, and we make that the third octet of our Axia subnet. So, for example, the building that we're in, the business LAN, I can tell you this, is 192.168.3. So our Axia network is 10.0.3, so on and so forth. It just makes it easier to distinguish IP addresses when we look them up.
Gotcha. Yeah. Chris Tobin, I've noticed that the folks at Telos, they're shipping some, maybe more than just some, maybe most of it, of the Axia gear with the default IP range. It's 10.216.0. something. And I wonder, where did this come from? Oh, 216 is the area code where Telos is, and maybe they just thought, oh, that'll help. If people keep it that 10.216.whatever, then we'll know that at least that was a partial factory default where they started. And so I have made one of my radio stations all that. It's 10.216. Blah blah blah. And what was your scheme, Chris Tobin, or what is?
Well, let's see. My scheme was at one time. Let's see. When I first installed the Axia system, we did 172.16.100. That was my non-routable IPs for the entire network. And then I had a gateway connection so we could traverse over to the business LAN and do other things. And I did it that way because it guaranteed no chance for anybody plugging something in that could possibly have any way to interrupt, or I should say conflict. Because, most PCs, most computer devices these days, or back then, even then, they had 192.168.1.0.1.115. And, all it would take, somebody's taking their laptop, plugging it in, and then, or it tries to do a the local IP, without a DHCP available. I forget the name of it now. And that too, 169 could show up. So I just made sure 172.16.100 guaranteed nobody's going to be there. And it worked flawlessly for a long time. So, and I just did a range of IPs for each studio, each location. There's a node where there's a console or desk, and it worked out just fine. But I did document, and I made sure, and I know I've mentioned this before. Even the cross connect cables, the Cat5 cables in the patch bay at the router and at the nodes, even those cables had numbers on them, so you knew exactly what was going on. And the chart, or the book that had the information, there were 3 copies. And each copy was available at the positions where cables could be moved around. So the rack room, master control, and the engineering office. And there was an electronic version also available. So we had ways of keeping track of stuff. And if you made any changes on the paper, you made a change electronic, print out a new sheet, put it in the binder. Only 3 binders had to be updated. Everything else was electronic. And it worked. And it was a news operation, as you know. So it was mission critical at 24 hours a day.
So, Alex and Chris, you guys are involved with a lot of installing what I think is high tech nowadays. You're not doing too many things the old-fashioned way. Kind of give us a little overview, if both of you would, about the engineering that you're doing, and what's your philosophy about trying to give stations value and let them operate in ways that you can take care of them remotely if you have to, and that. What's the best practices that you guys are implementing nowadays?
Well, it's the remote aspect is huge for us, in that we're a pretty limited staff for the number of stations that we're working with here. We
like every radio station out there.
Yes, not unique to our certainly not unique to our situation, but we're dealing with 32 AM and FM stations and a satellite network of 60 plus affiliates. We're not responsible for their internal operations, but we do have 7 locations, and there's 2 of us really on the IT side. We have the IT engineering side. We have a handful of really great RF guys in our company, and we're pretty blessed in that way. But so the remote part of it for us is huge. So we I don't know if this is considered a best practice, but we have made a strong practice from day one, really, of bridging our audio over IP networks and our business networks in all of our buildings and making them accessible from all of our locations. We have a pretty sophisticated site-to-site MPLS data network. All of our sites are connected to that site, and also both of our homes are also connected the same way, so that my house is another subnet on our corporate LAN, and the benefit there is that we just have immediate access on our laptop or desktops or whatever to get where we need to get.
The blessing and a curse.
Yeah. Also, our Cisco phone extensions ring at our houses too, which is is what it is. But it's the remote part is absolutely key, and we made the decision very early on that our priority in terms of security. We get some flack sometimes for the interconnection and making things as accessible as we do. Our approach has just been to secure the network from the outside in. I mean, you're not going to get into our network, and if you are in, then you have access to what you need to have access to. And that's been really key in us being able to respond timely and to deal with things as we need to in all of our sites.
Yeah. We can take this a step further. I don't know if this is in the scope of what we wanted to talk about, but Chris mentioned bridging our networks. And when we first started with our Axia installations, we put a Cisco 2811, just a router, sitting between what we call our business LAN and our Axia LAN. And our Axia LAN was effectively completely closed off other than that router. But multicast was blocked. That was just to allow us to get to web interfaces, web UIs, from our business network so that we could see power station UIs and things like that. Recently, we've taken that to a new level. And I'll mention, we worked with Telos, we worked with Axia, and they were hugely helpful in telling us the caveats of what we needed to think about here. But rather than having that router between the 2 networks, we actually started doing VLAN tagging. And what that allowed us to do was really completely marry those 2 networks, but tag them with individual VLANs. So our Axia VLAN, for example, is VLAN 333. It has to be a higher VLAN for QoS reasons. But and then our business LAN is what is our business LAN?
VLAN 1.
Is it still 1? Okay. And then we have other VLANs too. But what that allowed us to do then was access an Axia specific port, or a business LAN specific port, or a Wi-Fi subnet specific port on any switch in our building, which sounds terrifying. But if you follow the steps correctly and follow Axia's QoS policies to a letter, then it opens up so much. We can spin up an Axia port on any switch in the building with 2 lines, 2 command lines in the switch, and it's safe. I mean, it's effective. We don't have multicast flooding all over our network because of QoS, and it's contained. So that's been huge for us.
So does that imply that that every switch in the building is a switch that can handle IGMP and the QoS requirements? Effectively, yes.
That would be a prerequisite. I mean, if you were going to do this VLAN tagging thing, all of the switches would have to be on the approved list. Your existing switch would have to be. In our case, they were already. Yeah. And so it was relatively easy for us to just apply that QoS policy that had lived on our Axia exclusive switches to all of them. But you can imagine, Kirk and Chris, I mean, like, we in our office we have a couple of business LAN switches. That's what they used to be for us. So like when we would get a new Axie device or whatever we want to mess with in our office, we would have to make sure that we had another run to our office of it from an Axie switch in the other side of the building, and it was a major hassle. Now it's like, well, this switch on our desk, today we want port 7 to live on the Axia LAN, and so we get in the switch and we say this switch port is now VLAN 333, enter, and plug our Axia device in, and we're literally on the full bore multicast network.
And we didn't just do this on a whim. We actually had a specific reason. We were installing a new studio across town. I mean, less than a mile away from our headquarters here. And we had decided we didn't want to create a second Axia network in that building. We also didn't want to bring another ISP into that building and phone lines, or in our case, PRIs. We decided we would lease a piece of dark fiber between these buildings, light it ourselves, which is great, but we had to combine all those networks to get them across that one link. So that's when we started talking to, an IT sort of a consulting firm that we work with, as well as Telos, and took us a while, and we were terrified, but we took one night, started after midnight, and destroyed the network for a while, but put it back together and everything was good. So that allowed us then to get our Axie network, our business network, all of those subnets across to our other building for only the cost of the dark fiber. We didn't have to bring in new monthly services.
Most people, if you're like me, you may have accidentally plugged some audio over IP network, and we're using Axia kind of generically because it's probably about the same with any of them right now. But since we're all familiar with Axia, we'll say that you may have accidentally plugged something from an Axia network into something else. Like I accidentally cross-connected two networks here at my office, and all of a sudden my Wi-Fi didn't work. And I had lots of blinking lights on all the equipment, and things got really slow on my normal business network, and this is probably because there's clock packets everywhere. The Wi-Fi just got real stupid, and so of course nothing about the network I plugged into was compliant with what the performance level that it needs to have, the quality of service and having IGMP groups, things like that. So it sounds like basically your business network is a totally Axia capable network, and using VLAN tagging, you keep the networks logically separate from each other. Is that correct? Is that the gist? Okay. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And the key is, like I said, the QoS policy is hugely important because you still do have to block multicast across those subnets. And we've done the exact same thing before, Kirk. I mean, we've plugged in the early days of our audio over IP installations. There was a very specific line in our switches that was, I don't remember the line.
IGMP snooping query.
That's it. Yep. And what would happen is every time we plugged in a new studio engine or any sort of audio over IP gear, effectively the switches would query all the switch ports and flood the network with traffic. And we couldn't for the longest time figure out why every time we plugged in our case, a power station, the entire Axia network would melt down for a minute or 2 minutes. But once we actually maybe paid attention to the installation guides and fixed those switch commands, that wasn't an issue anymore. But yeah, we've done the exact same thing and had the same question marks.
Wow. Now, if I wanted to do something similar to what you've done at my stations, have you shared enough of your experience back with Axia support? In other words, do I need to call Axia support? Do I need to call you, or get you all on a conference call?
They knew. I mean, I think they're pretty well versed in the procedure. They were down with what we were doing.
They were very, very helpful.
Okay.
There's something to be said for segregating these networks.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's certainly. If you want the ultimate in like making sure that things are how they were to be, and troubleshooting obviously is easier when there's moving parts and pieces to things and whatever. We've just made the decision on this and other issues, frankly. The convenience is worth the trade-off for us of the slightly increased risk of trouble and or difficulty in troubleshooting a problem, for the convenience of being able to ship things where we need them to be, and also having Axia everywhere. It just was. It really wasn't. It wasn't a hard decision for us to make in our application. Your mileage may vary, but it was. It was worth it.
In our case, it was kind of a necessary evil. If we didn't have that building across town, we would probably still have a completely segregated Axia network. But we had to do something to get across that fiber optic link.
We're going to examine this issue just a little bit more because it's really interesting and about there's lots of ways to skin a cat, right? If you know what you're doing, any of those ways is probably just as good as any other. I shouldn't have used that analogy. That's just awful. I'm sorry, but it's a figure of speech. We're going to take a quick break for our sponsor, the Telos Alliance, and come back with some more information about VLANing and the reasons to do what you guys did or the reasons not to, which is what most folks do. And then I want to talk a little bit about connectivity with IP radios and whatever else you guys are doing that's kind of cool right now. Our show is brought to you in part by the folks at the Telos Alliance, and I got a little video to share with you. Sat down with an engineer friend of mine at Cracker Barrel. Here we go.
Not much in the paper today, is there?
Yeah, not much. Seems tough to stay informed,
Like we're missing out on stuff, important stuff.
Yeah, feels like week-old news. Yesterday's stories. Half the tech stuff in here seems out of date by the time I see it.
What Kurt doesn't know is I'm way ahead of everyone else around here. Every Thursday, I get this newsletter in my email. It's Direct Current. The folks at the Telos Alliance publish this.
What Joe doesn't know is I keep one step ahead of the radio guys in this market. Every Thursday, I get Direct Current from the folks at the Telos Alliance. It's a free newsletter about radio engineering, audio, streaming, studios, everything.
Thursday afternoons, we have our department head meeting. I look like a genius, thanks to the knowledge, updates, and advice in Direct Current. Sometimes I wonder if I should tell Kirk about Direct Current. Might help him out.
I wonder if I should let Joe in on my secret. He could use a little help sometimes.
Nah.
Get Direct Current in your inbox every Thursday. Read profiles of engineers and newsmakers in the broadcast community. Get technical pointers putting you and your facility at an advantage. Important industry news and views. Plus, you'll be up to date on Telos, Omnia, Axia, and Zipstream products. It's all here in the Direct Current newsletter. Subscribe online at telosalliance.com/directcurrent. That's telosalliance.com/directcurrent.
So, Direct Current, you ought to subscribe to it. I got mine today, but I haven't read it yet. It just came in on the way traveling back to the office here from downtown Nashville. So, right after the show, I'm going to read Direct Current. By the way, we got some cool things coming up for you in Direct Current, so don't miss them. Go ahead and subscribe at telosalliance.com/directcurrent. All right, this is episode number 322 from This Week in Radio Tech. Chris Tobin is with us from, is it Chicky and Pete's? Did I get that right?
Chickies and Pete's. Yes, you got it right.
Chickies and Pete's. All right.
Chickies.
So I understand you've moved. Did you get some better signal or more beer or just?
No, I was in. Of course, I picked the same location, near location that the broadcast group is coming to do. So I had to move over.
Of course. Why not? It'd be rude not to.
I scouted out the space. I was like, this guy, I asked them, and I said, do you know where they set up? They go, oh, no, we don't. They just pick a different place every time. I'm like, okay. Of course, we picked the same one tonight. So I just moved 2 tables. That's it. That's all. We're good. Still have the same signal. I think the video looks good. My lighting might be a little off, but other than that, we're doing good.
It looks intimate. It looks like you're in a night. It looks like you're in a sports bar.
I'm in a sports bar. The space I'm in is quite large, but this camera view and the lighting makes it appear as though I'm on a small set and it's just you and I. Go ahead, tell me some secrets. It's just the two of us.
Hey, man, I'm sure there's been secrets told in that sports bar.
Oh, I bet. All
right, so Chris Moran, Alex Linger are with us from West Virginia Radio, and guys, we were talking about whether to combine your AOIP network and your business network. And the standard advice is no, keep them separate. It's a lot easier that way. If you want to have a computer be able to talk to both, just put 2 network cards in there and connect, one to one network and one to the other network. And hey, that works fine for almost everybody. You guys, due to some other reasons, you needed to find a way to run both networks together. So you had easy access to both from everywhere, and you could ship IP access and IP telephony or whatever, all the stuff you needed from one location to another location that's coming online. Is that right?
That's it. In fact, the downtown, our new corporate location downtown, the only, other than cable television for TV, the only thing coming into that building is our piece of dark fiber from the building that we're in right now. So we provide for that building internet from here. We provide our Axia audio over IP network from here. We provide our phone system from here. There's nothing else in that building but cable television and a piece of dark fiber from here. So, yeah, that was really the necessity, was to combine everything that we could ship on one piece of fiber between these buildings. It's a 10 gig per second link between the buildings.
Are you guys doing any of that, security access card type stuff for employees to get in and out?
We are. It's funny, actually, those systems are not linked. Those are totally separate. But yeah, we do them separately in each building.
Oh, okay. Well, that'd be a cool thing to have linked as well. Yeah. So we won't go there.
Yes, it would.
Are they two existing systems that are different, or what?
Yeah, the building that we're in now, kind of our audio headquarters, if you will, is actually a shared space. There's a newspaper below us who sort of runs the facilities. We've got the second floor, so we don't run that system, but we do have our own system at the new building. Gotcha.
Okay, but if it wasn't a shared space, then you tie them together and have convenient programming access from one.
Absolutely,
for both places. Gotcha. So let's. I'm curious about what other technology you guys are doing that is more cutting edge, and I know we've talked a bit about IP radios. Tell us what your experience is, what you like, what you don't like, what you stubbed your toe on, and what went, wow, that works fantastically. Talk about that if you would.
We love microwave. That's another big thing that we're doing just a ton of in our area. Really in all of our markets. We started with some pretty high-end 11 gigahertz licensed stuff for some STL shots in our Charleston market, and then up here to basically they were from studio facilities to transmitter facilities. But we're doing that a lot more now, even with some unlicensed. It's amazing. The technology, honestly, is amazing, and the price point is even more hard to resist. Some of the stuff from Ubiquity today that's $800 a side is proving, for at least in our applications, to be broadcast ready. And obviously the change in the commission's policy a few years ago to make that legal as the final STL link was gigantic in some of those bands. Great story. I mean, we were very, very early adopters. We were doing this 7 or 8 years ago when we built our Cumberland, Maryland facility, when it was not legal it was not legal for those links to be the final. They couldn't be the final distribution link to your transmitter site, at least in the 11 gigahertz band that we were operating in. And so our workaround, which was, I wouldn't say advised by our broadcast attorney, but it was definitely acknowledged as a gray area, was that when we got out to these are you shocked? Okay.
No, I loved it. It was good.
When we got out to our transmitter sites, we put a pair of unlicensed access points 4 feet across from each other and in the building, and said, there's our final RF link in our chain. It's a 4-foot RF link from one rack to the other. And we felt like if we were to ever get challenged on it, that would satisfy the requirement of the 11 gig not being the final link in the chain. And we ran it that way until the rules were relaxed, and then we took those out of service. But we love it for a lot of reasons, and that's another great reason when we talk about combining our networks. When you think about getting out into remote sites like your transmitter facilities, how cool is it to send a link out to your site where you can drop IP phones out there, and you can control your exciter and your processing, and you can also be sending your audio over IP network along that same link. It's really changing how we're operating in just about all of our markets.
You mentioned the Ubiquity brand, and Chris Tobin has demonstrated some Ubiquity stuff here, and I wrote a paper about using Ubiquity stuff, all unlicensed stuff in Mississippi. But maybe you could tell us about. You mentioned that, but have you tried any of the other brands? I know that one guy that I really respect, he's been on the show before, Dave Anderson, has says, I like Ubiquity fine. I think I'm finding a bit more comfort and security in the Cambium line of IP radios. What do you guys like or comfortable with?
So Cambium's our go-to.
Yep.
For our big links, and I'm talking the ones that are like leaving this building we're at, where all of our stations go to be distributed, and then these are absolute mission critical, cannot fail type links. And we do that. It's really less about the gear, honestly, for me, and more about the licensing and the spectrum protection. Really is more, I think, why we do it. They've been fantastic. We've used but when this used to still be a thing. In fact, the first ones we put in Cumberland were Harris Stratix radios, and you want to talk about radios that have run like in all kinds of conditions over on the mountaintops in Cumberland, Maryland, that have not failed either. I mean, those things have been bulletproof.
In fact, the Harris radios are funny because they've been so foolproof, like you said, that I don't think we actually know how to get into them because we've never had to.
That's a benefit. Hey, Chris Tobin lets me know that he's got to make way for another actual radio station to come in to his spot in just a minute. So he's got to leave shortly. Chris, give us your some of your thoughts on this IP radio links or anything else you want to ask to our friends from West Virginia.
Well, I can say that the IP radio links, when I first started working with them in the city, we had a link across the Hudson. That lasted 9 years. That was a 5.8 that worked really well. I did a lot of large antennas, so the link budget was quite big. Lots of headroom, so it worked out nicely. Since then, I've done a lot of 5.8 point-to-point stuff, point-to-multipoint. Matter of fact, on this netcast, I do it quite often, as the ketchup bottle reference earlier was mentioned. And I find the radios that I've been using, Ubiquities, work really well in many applications. Cambia is another one. I've used Redline over the years. They're really robust. They're a little pricey, but boy, are those things potent. And I've used them. I used it from the Empire State Building on our transmitter room on the 81st floor to the deck of a cruise ship on the Hudson for a July 4th broadcast. Yeah. And what I did was I bridged our corporate LAN into the radio. So I actually, from our studios in downtown Manhattan, across our LAN, the dark fiber we had, up to Empire, from Empire down to the ship, the deck, and then I put my IP phones on the deck. We had 2 radio stations doing the broadcast from there. So the newsroom for one station could talk to the folks in the field, and the jocks could talk to the folks back at the call screening room on the deck of the ship. And the reason we did this was actually a test. It was actually not supposed to be the original primary connection. We did order POTS and ISDN. However, turns out that the cruise ship, brand new cruise ship, it was being christened this day, and we were there for that reason, everything on the ship was fiber. So when Telco showed up with this copper device at the deck, on the dock, the telecommunications manager was like, we have no way to bring that on board. I got the phone call that morning. That morning, I get the phone call, we've got an issue. It's like, what's that? And the guy explains to me, I said, no kidding. All right, I'm on my way with my pizza box antennas, and we're going wireless. And that's what we did. That was plan B, and it worked for 8 hours. I kid you not. It was fun time. So that was my baptism by fire of, you can do a lot with the RF if you plan it out. As we mentioned earlier in the netcast, documentation, planning. Don't just assume because it's Wi-Fi it's going to work. Because remember, Wi-Fi protocols do not work in the environments that we're accustomed to. You've got to coerce them. You've got to make sure you've tweaked them. Just like you're talking about the VLANs, IGMP snooping. There's a reason for that. Spanning tree. All these terms I'm telling you are very important to understand and realize that if you don't do it, you will have a crash and burn of your network. I don't care if it's Axia, WheatNet, Ravenna, Lavo. They all follow the same protocols. So if you don't pay attention, and our guests know exactly what I'm talking about, you're dead in the water. So learn to experiment, learn to read up on this stuff, and have some good times. And you can, like I'm doing right now, I'm on a wireless link. This was a plan B position I'm in. I wasn't planning on doing it this way, but I'm up and running.
I take it the link from Empire to the deck of the carrier, that was an unlicensed link, right?
Yes, that was 5.8 through the special glass that was Mylar coded. We there was a lot of attenuation when I did a return loss with a spectrum analyzer with the antenna and facing through the glass. At 5.8, the attenuation was somewhere around 20 dB. So even though I may have been putting out several dBm of RF, by the time it got through the glass and down to the deck, it was very minimal. But I did make sure I used a 2-foot square flat panels with a 10-degree beam, and it worked. And those were the Redline product, and they worked out really nice. Again, awesome. I had a lot of folks just looked at me, at the telecommunications folks at the Empire State Building, like, let me get this straight. You're shooting through this window with this thing down to that ship uptown, which was about 3/4 of a mile away. I was like, yeah. It's like, and it works? I was like, it works so well. Hey, want to talk to the guys on the deck? They're on the IP phone. What? And I had to prove it by putting a piece of metal in front of the antenna so the connection would drop.
Oh,
and I purposely, and I also did the thing that people, you never do, is I purposely disrupted the link several times before we went to broadcast to make sure that it would recover. Because, you can't get to the 81st floor of the Empire State Building lickety-split if there's a problem. And if, I got one person on one end, one person on the other end, So these are things you plan out in advance. But it worked, and it worked well, and we did similar 5.8 linking of events in many other parts of Manhattan, and it worked very well, and we were the ones that came out looking better than the others that tried traditional methods that sort of failed under pressure.
Sure. Chris, thanks for your time and being with us, and thanks for figuring out a plan B. You so often do.
Well, I will tell you this. The reason I do the plan B is I've been doing it for most of my career, but I was well reinforced. My first job, one of my big network jobs at a small place, when I was working with a gentleman who said, look, you never know when you're going to be in a situation where you can't control it. So whatever you do, always fly in, roll in with a plan B or a plan C, because you never know when that'll happen. The guy who told me that, he's passed away since then, is Bill Holder. The small place that I learned these little techniques from, and the other engineers I worked with, Brian Wilson, Bob Mack, Greg Monty, Angel Bordone, well, ABC Radio Networks. And I can tell you we did a lot. We won a lot of Edward R. Murrow Awards, and I did a lot of crazy news events from places that, trust me, there's no wire nearby. It was all wireless. So it's worth the fun, and it's worth the headache sometimes, or as like some people like to say, you're a pioneer, so you got arrows in the back. Yeah, I got a few scars. I learned from them.
All right, Chris. Thanks again for joining us, and make way for the other guys. We'll see you later. All right, Chris
Absolutely.
Tobin has to take off right now, and he's our usual co-host with us here on the show. Hey, it's This Week in Radio Tech, episode 322, with a couple of guys from West Virginia. We have Alex Linger and Chris Moran with us. So, guys, you've been telling us about IP radios and such. I got a question that follows on what I asked Chris, and that is about licensed versus unlicensed. Can you give me your philosophy or your decision point? How do you decide if you do licensed radios or unlicensed IP radios?
It's sketchy for us. It's not an exact science, We look at it. We're fortunate in a lot of ways in the regions that we operate. It's not Manhattan. There are far less people putting up these links in the areas that we're operating.
There are no cruise ships around where we are.
Right. So it's much easier for us to make the decision a lot of times to use an unlicensed link because we have far less fear of interference. Now, I'll tell you some of the main factors in our decision making is that if we're shooting up to a tower farm on a hillside where there is a ton of microwave already, that is a factor that we take into account. Certainly what we're carrying on those links, even all the way down to what stations they are, frankly. Sometimes as a decision maker, if we have a repeater somewhere, and our breakdown here is between spending $2,000 or $3,000 on this link, or it's spending $30,000 on this link. I mean, that, and there's some financial elements, some economic elements that go into the decision making, but really it has more to do with, I think, in any case, we want these things to be stable. I don't want to give the impression that we're throwing things away because of what they are. It really has more to do with how crowded the areas that we're working in are, and if we think we can squeeze an unlicensed link in there and still have enough stability. Plus, the new stuff is so good at channel searching and readjusting based on interference with its own analyzer. That has come a long way just in the 7 or 8 years that we've been doing microwave.
So I've only used the ubiquity function that lets you see a spectral display of what the antenna is looking at to help you decide, I think I better go into this part of the band or this part of the band. So you're using radios that will actually monitor for interference and then move if they need to?
That's right. The Ubiquity Air Fiber series does that. At least with the firmware that we're running on these. We have some of the 5.4, 5.8 stuff over in Cumberland, Maryland, in fact, where it changes channels periodically. And we have a 24 gig air fiber link also in our Beckley market that will also auto sense for interference and will make those channel changes accordingly if it needs to. It's not seamless. In fairness, I've heard it do it. There's a packet or two. The cambium stuff as it ramps. In fact, the air fiber stuff, when it ramps power, sometimes I've saw a packet or two drop periodically if it's dealing with weather conditions. But it's close enough. I can deal with the couple millisecond hiccup for the cost savings. When
you're thinking about either licensed or unlicensed microwave radios, what's your biggest fear or concern? And maybe after using them for a while, that fear has been allayed. But we got real comfortable with 950 megahertz links, and we kind of know how they're going to behave and what they're going to do in the broadcast business. What's different about 5.8 or even 24 gigahertz that, I don't know, doesn't keep you up at night, but at least, you got to worry about it until you're satisfied it's okay?
24 scares the pants off of me. Because we stretched a couple, I think, past the distance that we should have. So we were marginal. I remember we put the first 11 gig link in here the Cumberland ones I didn't have the chance to see as they went in, but the one in Morgantown, for probably the first month, anytime it thought about raining, I remember being logged into the web UI and just refreshing that thing constantly to watch the signal strength. I just was convinced that there's no way these small, 3-foot antennas are going to make this 3.5 mile shot, and it's going to be perfectly fine with this low amount of power. Like, it was really kind of mind blowing to me how stable they have been. So I was concerned about rain fade, even though the manufacturer and our installers would say, that's why we run the studies. We know how that works. And it just, that was, the weather was a thing for me here in Cumberland, where they get a significant amount of snowfall in the winter. So the weather was concerning. But I think it just comes from time, Kirk. Honestly, the more of these that you deploy and you start to trust them, I mean, they're almost becoming for us like the 950s. The bigger fear, I think, still for me is that it exposes weaknesses in our backup. I mean, in a lot of these places where we've added microwave, we've held on to our 950s, obviously. We're not giving the license back until we have to. And those stay in as our backup links. We've gotten lax about making sure that, that over the years you get lax about just double checking, and it's again hard with 30 stations in 7 markets to check them as frequently as we'd like to. We worry about things like exposing weaknesses in our backup systems, but the links have been incredibly stable.
Yep. Wow. Hey, we're going to take one last quick break, and when we come back, guys, let's do 2 things. Number one, if you've got a tip that you'd like to pass along to others, that's something you've discovered lately, maybe a website, a tool, a technology that just is working great, you got to share it with other people. Let's talk about that real quick. And then let's also talk about your podcast and the videos that you produce and where folks can find those, okay? We'll be right back. You're watching This Week in Radio Tech episode 322. Chris Tobin's been our co-host. I'm Kirk Harnack along with you as well. And let's talk for a minute about, what did I say? Oh, yeah, about Zipstream. Zipstream is a brand of the Telos Alliance, and Zipstream is the brand name that we use for streaming products. Web streaming is just terrifically important and becoming more and more and more so. Don't get left behind. Make sure that your broadcast facilities have a presence on the web. And of course, you can do streaming with free software, but I'm not sure that's a great idea. First of all, I've heard so many bad streams on the interwebs. It's just amazing. And yet I've never heard a bad stream come from a Telos Zipstream product. Why? Well, one reason is every Zipstream product, hardware or software, comes with audio processing. It all comes with at least the 3-band basic Omnia AXE design audio processing. This is the classic 3-band design with an intelligent look-ahead limiter that mitigates the problems of a classic textbook look-ahead limiter. And I've used that 3-band limiter, or that 3-band processor, on lots of my streams for years. Now, I've recently upgraded to an Omnia 9 style of processing that's also available. So let's think about the product line. There's the Omnia R1. I'm sorry, Omnia, the Zipstream R1. That's a 1-rack unit box. In fact, I've got one here in my office right there. That's the Zipstream R1, and that will take one audio program in. It'll audio process that with a 3-band processor, and then you can encode it 2 different ways with maybe the same encoder at 2 different bit rates, or 2 different encoders like MP3 and AAC at the same or different bit rates. And then you can distribute those encoded streams. That it has the software in there to format them for Shoutcast, for Icecast, for Wowza, and RTMP as well. So you can send those streams out to different types of servers. So four server streams can go out simultaneously. Plus, you can get a confidence stream as well. So that's one way to do it. That's a plug in the box. You plug it in and you program a few things, and bam, it's just an appliance. There's also, though, Zipstream software, and there's 2 kind of different levels here. There's Zipstream X2. And there's also Zipstream 9X2. That's got the Omnia 9 processing in it. And then you can also upgrade that. If you have X2 software and you want to add the Omnia 9 processing, you can certainly do that. And the reason I bring this up about the X2 software is because the folks at Telos Alliance are running special pricing on this right now. What used to cost about $1,000 for the Zipstream X2 now has a promotional price of $650. And the Zipstream 9X2 with the Omnia 9 style of processing, which is amazing, it's now $1,495. That's a $500 savings off the regular nearly $2,000 price. If you want to upgrade, you can upgrade for $995, and that's a savings off the normal price too. So if you haven't upgraded to Zipstream X2 or 9X2, now really is the time to do it. This is what I'm using at all my stations. I got to tell you, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stations across the country and around the world are using Zipstream X2. A couple of other features that are built into the Zipstream X2. You get this incredible metadata engine that ingests metadata, puts it in the stream. It's got a lot of presets for metadata filtering so that the formats are just exactly right. You can write your own filter if you want using the Lua scripting engine, or we even provide a capture program to capture whatever's coming out of your automation system, or maybe a metadata aggregation program. If we don't have a preset for it already, you capture that, send it to Telos support, and they will write you a Lua script to properly parse that. So that is really cool. It's by the way, it's priced on a per input basis. So when the promotional price of Zipstream X2 being $650 or 9X2 being $1,495, that's for an input. You can encode that in a PC as many ways as you want, different encoding algorithms, different bit rates, and then you can take each of those streams and send them out to as many different places as you want to. So if you've got geo diversity on your streaming, or if you've got a Shoutcast server plus an Icecast server that you feed and a Wowza server that you feed, no problem. You can send those all out, all for the same price. So the pricing model is per program input, and you can take that program input and do lots of stuff with it. So I've got 5 encoders running on an old Dell PC. It's an i5, so you want to have a good strong processor, because I'm doing all Omnia 9 processing, so that does take some CPU horsepower. But they sound great, and I just love this stuff. Promotional pricing, check with your dealer, your Telos dealer, for Zipstream X2 and 9X2 software. Oh, one more thing. It now includes the latest codec from Fraunhofer. Now, I realize there aren't decoders out there for it, but there will be, because this is the XHE AAC, Extended High Efficiency AAC codec from Fraunhofer, and it is really cool. It's beautiful. We did an interview with a fellow from Fraunhofer about this codec, and I think it could very well be an industry standard once car listening super really takes off, because of the wide bit rate that it will do. Apple HLS built in as well to X2 and 9X2. Thanks a lot to Zipstream from Telos Alliance for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, we're talking with Alex Linger and Chris Moran from West Virginia. Is it West Virginia Radio Corp, guys? Did I get that right? Or is it something else?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, good. Ooh, didn't want to make sure I was promoting your competitor or something. So about this time, we tend to offer up a tip for our listeners. You got a tip for us?
Yeah, I think we can give you something. I don't know if Chris came up with anything.
I did. It's on topic too, believe it or not.
Well, mine is loosely on topic. So when you're installing your audio over IP environment, chances are, and the chances are really good, that you're going to be running a lot of Cat 6 cable, a lot. So there are ends that I have come to love. They're made by Platinum Tools, and you can also get them from Black Box. They're called Easy RJ45 connectors, and what these do is allow you to, when you cut the jacket back on your Cat 6 and you have your exposed pairs, in the normal style, you'd have to trim them just short enough, but also long enough to make it in the connector and make it to the connector points. The Easy RJ45s let you leave those very long, pass it through the connector, and the wires actually come out the front of the connector. So you get a perfect length or distance between your connector points and your jacket every single time. Takes a special crimp tool that you can also get from Platinum Tools and Black Box, but well worth it, and it's a huge time saver, and you make good cables every time.
Well,
I see this.
I don't make good cables every time. I'm just going to be honest. You might make good cables.
All right, most of you will make good cables every single time.
What I'm looking for is the boot for the back that lets you put the boot on later if you forgot to put it on the cable. That's what I would like to have.
We would be billionaires if we could come up with that, Kirk.
We could we'll put this Platinum Tools web page along with these connectors on the show notes so folks can refer to that. Here's how to become billionaires. I mean, richer than Trump. Here's what we do: we get we get we invent a machine where you take the end of a piece of Cat 5 or Cat 6, right? And it's a machine maybe the size of a coffee can or a big pencil sharpener, and it's got a hole in the top, right? And you put the end of your cable down into the machine, and you push a button, and it goes, and you pull it out, and there's a cat connector on it, and it's all correct, and it's got a boot on it and everything. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yep. We'll work on that. We'll talk.
All right, the Platinum Tools Easy RJ45. We'll put that in the show notes. Chris, what do you got?
All right, so I just came up with this on the fly on topic. So we're talking about all these Ubiquiti brand air fiber radios and using them to, connect sites with audio over IP over them. There's one setting in there that about made me lose my mind that it took me a little while to find. When we installed our first ever one and we started passing traffic across it and we're testing it, the radio kept rebooting. So we would be pinging this thing, and suddenly the radio would reboot, and we're like, what in the world? Like, the link is perfect, and everything is good. It kept rebooting. There's a checkbox in there that is not very – you wouldn't think that you need to click this if you're creating a multicast network across it, because the checkbox says block multicast, but you have to check that box. Because what it really is saying is block multicast traffic from flooding the web UI portion of the radio. So it ignores, the block should say ignore multicast, frankly.
Yes.
But it'll ignore the multicast traffic on the radio, allowing it to pass, but not flooding the web UI of the radio and the CPU of the radio and causing it to reboot over and over and over. So you want to check the box very early on in your installation process on your air fiber radios from Ubiquiti that say block multicast when you're doing this on an audio over IP network.
Hey, that's a good tip.
Thanks, Alex.
So I think that when I first tested some Ubiquiti radios, they were little nano bridge radios, and I'm pretty sure I told it to block multicast, and then it worked. I mean, multicast got through. With that unchecked, I couldn't make it. I was making that work here in my office. I have some Air Fiber 5 radios, and those have this checkbox as well. The Air Fibers.
Yep, that's what we put in. That's the one. The one I'm thinking about was our Beckley installation. It was a 24 gig, but it was an Air Fiber, and it was the crazy because I saw that checkbox, but I thought, well, that's not what we want to do. We
don't check that.
Can't block multicast. That's what we're doing here, and I think. I didn't get an official explanation, but I think what's happening is it's flooding the processor on that radio, causing it to panic and it freaks.
Well, I need to go check my radios because my Air Fiber 5s, unfortunately I only ran one Cat 5 to each of them, so I'm not utilizing the management port and the data port separately. I told have the web GUI go over the data port as well. Now I've got to fix that. I've got to run a second cable to them when I end up doing carrying trunking over them. I think that's what I got to do. But I get really slow response of my web UI from both of the radios. Really slow.
That's why.
It's pain. That's why. I need to go find that checkbox and check it. Okay.
Yep. That's why.
I thought I had, but maybe I didn't. Cool. All right, guys. Hey, let's talk real quick about the podcast and the videos. You mentioned that you do this weekly. It tends to be an audio podcast, but I know I watched a live video version of it somewhere, right?
Yeah, we record weekly, usually on Sunday nights at 9:30. That changed last week, and it's probably going to change this week too. But our normal time is Sunday at 9:30 Eastern. Again, yeah, like you said, it's an audio podcast, but we do a Google Hangout and then put that live on YouTube.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So yeah, you can watch it live, and we encourage people to kind of join in. Send emails. That's ask@theradiotechguys.com, and we're hoping to get some more listener interaction. That's kind of where we want to get to. But yeah, that's the podcast. You can find it on iTunes and the Google Play Store and Stitcher, and then we also have a YouTube channel.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where you're. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Your very well-produced videos are there.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. We're kind of archiving our behind-the-scenes recordings of our podcast, but in addition, one of our goals really, we're trying to get in a routine of this. We want to be producing a couple of these a week, just content. It's fairly easy for us to do. We just keep saying we just need to shoot what we're doing like on a daily basis and just start publishing some of these behind-the-scenes stuff that tech people were interested in. I know I eat up that kind of content when I see people doing stuff that's cool, and so we're trying to get more disciplined about shooting more of the stuff we're doing and putting a couple of these out a week. That's just going to cover a whole range of topics, but you can find links to all this stuff from our website, which is theradiotechguys.com, which you can see there. And
coming up this week, we're going to talk about something that affects most radio stations. We're going to talk about radio automation, and in our case, we use wide orbit. We're actually going to have William Irvin, Dub Irvin, on the show with us to talk a little bit about wide orbit.
That'll be cool. Tell Dub I said hi if you think to. I see him at some of the shows.
Yeah.
All right. Good deal. He'd be a good guest for our show too. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
And you guys really do get down in the weeds on some of your videos. And again, they're well produced. They look great, and I don't think you're scripted, but you guys are, you're not wasting my time in watching them. That's for sure.
I appreciate that. We're definitely not scripted. Stuff just happens, and there's a lot of stuff you don't see that gets cut in the edit. Believe me, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make it.
The cutting room floor has a big broom to sweep things out. Hey, right. I've enjoyed chatting with you guys. I appreciate it very much. Folks, you've been watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech, episode 322. Our sponsors, Lavo and the Crystal Clear Console. Also, the Telos Alliance and their weekly newsletter that they put out called Direct Current. And also from Telos, Zipstream with special promotional pricing on fantastic stream encoders and audio processors right now. Check it out with your dealer and look up Zipstream on the Telos Alliance websites. The Zipstream X2 and 9X2 with promotional pricing right now. Guys, we'll have the stuff in the show notes. It'll be great. Our thanks going out to Suncast for producing today's show and keeping us out of trouble, fixing problems as we go along. And also thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network, where you'll find many fine podcasts, interesting things to watch, things to give you some good belly laughs and make you scratch your head, maybe shake your head, too. All right. And our guests have been Alex Linger and Chris Moran from West Virginia Radio Corp and their website, their podcast and helpful videos at the Radio Tech Guys. All right. That's it, guys. We got to go, and we will see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.